I want to thank you all for joining me for a variety of different classes. I believe everybody here has attended a Todo Verde class at one point. And my name is Jocelyn Ramirez. I'm the chef and founder of Todo Verde, bringing you some culturally relevant plant-based dishes to your home. Hopefully you enjoy this cocktail. And for me, it's very near and dear because growing up in Southgate, we oftentimes drove to the port of San Pedro to eat seafood, especially during the summer break. And so eating seafood is something that was more of like an immediate family thing, not something that I grew up eating because of my grandparents, because in fact, my mom is from Zacatecas, which isn't near an ocean. And my dad is from Quito, but he grew up not being able to afford a lot of things and eat all the things. So once they migrated here to Los Angeles, eating seafood became sort of a regular part of our lifestyle. And so this is something that's like an immediate thing for my family. And I see that somebody else has a similar situation in Linwood as well too. So yeah, we used to go to places like in Linwood, El Perijuete, and then there's the other place down the street on Long Beach that I can't remember the name of. El Paisa, I think is what it was called, or something like that. I lived in Southgate for 10 years. Yeah, I grew up in Southgate. So, you know, that's something that my brother and I used to do is like, it's a hot day. We don't want to cook anything. We're just going to go get mariscos, right? And so when I became plant-based, that was really hard for me to let go of because I still wanted to eat things that still had that kind of seafood nature to them. And when I first ate heart of palm, I was actually not vegan or vegetarian yet, but I was with a friend and she made a salad that had heart of palm and I hadn't ever tried it before. And when I took a bite into it, I was like, whoa, this actually kind of tastes a little bit like imitation crab, or it has sort of that consistency and that flavor. And I'll talk about heart of palm a little bit more too. But I was like, whoa, this could actually be a really nice substitute for seafood if you didn't have it on hand right away. And so when I did go vegetarian, then vegan, I quickly reached for that heart of palm to start making some recipes happen with it. So let's get to the cocktail and then we'll talk a little bit about the heart of palm and the ingredients that go into that cocktail. So for the cocktail, I'd love to know who else is prepping along, just to kind of get a sense to see who else is going to be sipping on this. I see some hands. Okay, great. So it's really simple. I'm going to be juicing a few things right now. It's such a simple recipe. It's a citrus margarita. All I'm using, and I really need to sharpen my knife here. All I'm using is a couple of, I'm going to start off with one grapefruit. And then if I want a little bit more of that grapefruit flavor, I'll definitely add a little bit more to it. I have a really large orange that I'm going to be adding, and possibly another orange. It calls for about 2 oranges. I'm going to start with this large one, see how much juice I can get out of it, and possibly go for the second one, which is actually really juicy, probably has more juice than the first one. And then I have a lime. And before I start cutting the lime specifically, I want to just zest this a little bit. And I forgot to grab my tool for that. But you probably have something that looks like this. You know, it's a grater or a microplane is what it's called when it's handheld like this. And all I want to do is get a little bit of this this lime zest, mostly for the garnish that I'm going to be using on the cocktail. So I have a little bit of, I know the light's kind of washing it out, but I have a little bit of sal de Colima, which is a really, really nice flaky salt that comes from the state of Colima in Mexico. You can see how big the pieces of salt are. And so you can use any type of salt to rim your glass that you're going to be drinking your margarita with. And I really love this because it adds a little bit of bite and texture and it's not overly salty. And what I want to do is I just want to use my microplane to just zest a little bit of this lime zest. And you might see that I have a second camera set up right over my cutting board. So you should be able to see what I'm doing down below. But all I'm doing is I'm just zesting. And as I get to the white part of my citrus, I'm just moving along to the next piece. And I'm not going to add like too much to it, but this is going to be a really nice little pop of color. And then when you take a bite of your cocktail, you're also going to get little bits of this zest that are going to be like super vibrant, a nice little punch of flavor that you can add. So it's just a really, really simple step that's going to make your margarita even more delicious. So you can see I have quite a bit of that lime zest there. It's nice and green now. And then all I want to do is just kind of mix it together. So you get a nice little even ratio of salt to our lime zest. And I'll go ahead and just set that aside. So I just wanted to do that before I start getting into cutting of the lime, because then it gets a little bit harder to do it. You can still do it once it's cut, but it's not going to be as firm to do that with the lemon or the lime. I keep getting my limones confused because in Spanish we say limon for everything. It's like, which one is it? The lime, the lemon? So I have here just a little juicer that I'm going to use to squeeze all of this citrus into start to make my margarita. And this is just so simple. All this recipe calls for is just the citrus, a little bit of sugar, and your liquor, which I'm going to be using mezcal today, but you can definitely use tequila. And when you're thinking about like what kind of tequila or mezcal to use, just you always want to get a good quality one. It doesn't have to be overly expensive, but you just want to get one that doesn't taste like just straight up alcohol, but that has a little bit of like body, maybe a little bit of, sometimes you're able to taste little notes of sweetness. And so you just want to be able to provide something that's also going to be a nice flavor, because sometimes the alcohol is so strong in some of these, especially like the silver tequilas, and mezcal is typically silver, but, or clear, I should say. But the tequilas, when they're silver, sometimes they tend to be kind of like low grade. So you want to get one that's like a decent flavored one. I really like Milagro for cocktails like this. I just finished another tequila that I had, which is actually, it was kind of strong. So a little bit goes a long way. All right, I have my lime so far. So this is going to be this nice little punch of this like zesty lime acidic flavor. And really you want to go through this step of doing fresh citrus. A lot of times when you go to restaurants, they're using the like the one out of the container, like the one out of the it's like pre-mixed margarita mix. And I always, whenever I would go to restaurants, would ask if I was in a restaurant where I might think that they would be using a margarita mix versus fresh citrus. I always ask. And if they tell me that they are using the mix, then I would always ask, is there any way you can make it with fresh citrus? And they'd always be like, what? The margarita mix is good. It's not. So you can, you can definitely sense the flavors. Anytime you're drinking citrus directly, you want to use fresh citrus. So like, if you're going to be having an agua fresca or having a cocktail with citrus, you want it to be fresh. But you can sometimes get away with the pre-squeezed juice with food sometimes. It really depends on what the food is. Even for this dish that we're making of the heart of palm cocktail, you can probably get away with that pre-squeezed juice, but the kind that's refrigerated, not the kind that's in that green bottle that you get in the dry shelves of the grocery store, because that one is, it definitely has a lot more ingredients in it than just lemon or lime juice. And so you want to try to avoid things that have like too many stabilizers, because you're just going to get a really kind of odd, not fresh flavor. All I'm doing is I'm trying to just push through my citrus. I'm almost done with my orange here, and then I'll move on to my grapefruit. And if you didn't have grapefruit or orange or one of these ingredients, you can always use a little bit of pineapple juice. You can blend a mango. You can blend strawberries. I mean, you've all had, these types of margaritas at restaurants likely. And so, that's what I love about margaritas, is that you can really, really take it in any direction and make it so delicious. And you can keep adding more to it. You can add, for the strawberry margarita, you can add a few rose petals muddled with some simple syrup. You can add a little bit of rose water and see how that, you know, flavor profile fits in there for you. And then if you didn't have any, you know, raw sugar like the kind I'm using here, you could use a simple syrup. You could use agave. You could also use a little bit of maple syrup, which is kind of my easy go-to here at home. I oftentimes use maple syrup for cocktails. And I've been making cocktails more and more at home. Like I'll muddle some fresh mint from my garden and make mojitos with a little bit of rum. I've been growing a lot of passion fruit, and you can definitely make a nice margarita with some passion fruit. Okay, so my grapefruit is almost done. Again, just gonna push some of this through. Is anybody else squeezing along? Squeezing citrus? All right, let's see here. So let me get this last piece and let me see how I'm looking in here. So this is almost full. And I love the grapefruit in here because it just gives it another depth of flavor with the slight bitterness of the grapefruit versus just having everything be sweet with just orange, just strawberries, just this. So it kind of has like a multi-layered flavor with the acidity of the lemon, or the lime, the sweetness of the orange, just the bitterness of the grapefruit. So you have this like really nice range of flavors. All right. So I am going to, I think I got most of the juice out of that. I'm just gonna push this through a little bit more. And then what you wanna have handy is you need about a medium jar or a small pitcher, whatever you have on hand that'll fit the liquid in there. It's not gonna be a whole lot of liquid. So, you know, you don't have to get anything that's overly large. This is gonna serve about anywhere between like 3 to 4 people, depending on like whether people want seconds or not. If they want seconds, then maybe it'll be more like for 2 people or something like that. Okay, so I'm just gonna remove this, make sure I get all that juice from underneath, and I'm gonna keep this handy because I might end up needing to juice a little bit more depending on how I'm liking the flavors. So let me give my hands a quick rinse. And then I'm just gonna be using just a jar for mine. So this is, it fits about like 4 cups of liquid in it. I couldn't find the lid for it. Usually I like to put the lid on and give it a really good shake to dilute that sugar. I'll just end up using a whisk today, which is totally fine. And another thing that you can add to this is definitely some sparkling water, or just chilled water would work perfectly fine. You'll see that I probably have about like 1.5 cups of juice. I'll likely end up adding more juice to this. And the other thing I'm gonna add is I have a 1/2 cup of raw turbinado sugar. So this is just like very low processed sugar. Again, you can use a little bit of agave syrup, or you can use a little bit of simple syrup. You'd be more around like 1/3 cup of that simple syrup or so. So I'm gonna add in my 1/2 cup. And really what you wanna do, you can see that separation, but this is all acid right now because of all the citrus in here. So if you mix it or shake it, you're going to start to see it dilute. And so I'm just gonna grab a whisk. You can get a fork, and you just wanna mix until you start to see that sugar dilute. You just wanna keep on mixing until you start to see, and it'll just take a couple minutes for it to completely dilute. But it will, because there's so much acid in here from the orange and the grapefruit and the lime, that it will definitely dilute. I'm gonna give it a little taste just to kind of see if I wanna add more. Ooh, that's so good. That is already so good. I'm still gonna add the other grapefruit because it's a little bit sweet from the orange. So I'm definitely gonna add the other grapefruit to kind of like round it out a little bit. And I think I might also add just the other orange just to have more juice. So I'm gonna just add all of my citrus. Wow, this knife really needs a good sharpening. I should be able to cut through that really quickly.
Jocelyn, how much sugar should you be adding for about 1 cup of juice?
For just 1 cup of juice, you'd probably add about like a 1/4 cup of sugar. And you can maybe add a little bit less if you wanted to, like start with 1/8 of a cup and then add the alcohol to it. So you're gonna have about like half the recipe or so. So you can definitely do maybe like about, you know, like a 1/2 cup of the alcohol, and then give it a taste. And if you feel like it needs a little bit more sweetness, then you can add that additional amount, that additional 1/8 cup to get to a 1/4 cup. The other thing is, if you find that it's too sweet, like maybe you added the sugar already and you're like, oh, wow, this is a little too sweet for me, then this is where just a little bit of water or a little bit of sparkling water will do the trick to dilute it for you. Sparkling water is nice, or agua mineral is nice, because it gives a little fizz and it kind of makes the cocktail feel like it has a little something in there, you know, kind of like a paloma that has, you know, some soda in there. It has some bubbles. And so it just kind of makes like a more interesting cocktail. Okay, so I have so far 1/2 of my grapefruit. I'm gonna add the other one. I see more people juicing now. So we're almost there with our, when I like how Lilia has like her electric one. That just makes it so much better. Yeah, I don't have an electric one here, but believe me, for Todo Verde, we have like an industrial one. I'm like wishing I had it right now, because this would be done in like 2 seconds. All right. So I got my 2 more pieces of, 2 more halves of grapefruit. So like 1 more whole grapefruit here. I'm gonna just juice this orange, which should be nice and juicy. And I'll go ahead and add that to the mix. And then the last thing that you'll wanna add, if you're already a step ahead of me, is you'll wanna add 1 cup of your alcohol. So you can start at 3/4 cups if you wanted to. So you can do either 3/4 cups or the full cup of tequila. And of course, you know, you want to use, the reason I'm saying like a silver or reposado is because an añejo is a tequila or mezcal that has been aged. And so that is typically drank on its own. You wouldn't really mix it into a cocktail. You would just enjoy it with you know, maybe a wedge of orange on the side or something like that. Oh, I see the Milagro right there in Lilia's screen too. It's a great tequila. And when you're using the silver or reposado, those are more meant to be used in a, you know, in a mix, in a cocktail, because they're not, obviously the reposado has gone through some of the aging process, but not as much as an añejo has. And so those are more kind of adequate for a cocktail to be mixed. All right, let me just push this pulp, some of this pulp through, and then I'll add it to my jar, and then add my liquor to it and give it a taste. And hopefully for folks who are already at that step, you'll find that it's a really, really simple cocktail recipe, but the flavors are just so on point. It's so easy. When you have good ingredients and they each taste good and you bring them together, best believe they're likely gonna make a really good dish or cocktail. So I'm just gonna make sure I'm getting all that juice from the bottom. And then I'm going to pour this into my jar. So now I have a much fuller jar, and I'll continue to whisk that. And let me just give my hands a rinse. So I'm probably looking at about 3 cups or so of citrus. I'm gonna give this a nice whisk until I get all that little last sugar at the bottom there diluted. And then I'll go ahead and add my 1 cup. It's almost diluted. I'm like almost there. Some of it is just pulp and some of the pieces of citrus in there. And I'm using a mezcal. It's called burrito. It's really, really good mezcal. I'm gonna use just the whole cup of it because I know it's gonna be so good. So let me get that open. And I'm gonna pour a whole cup into my mixture here. There we go. And it's filled all the way to the top. So the last things we need to do is just get our glasses ready. So I'm gonna, before I add any ice to my glass, let me give this a taste. So good, so good, and so simple. So the last thing I'll do, let me set this aside for just a moment, is I'm just gonna use one of my pieces of orange. You can use a piece of lime, and I have my glass here, and I'm just going to use a little bit of that moisture from the orange that's been squeezed to rim the glass. You can use the lime, the grapefruit, the orange. You can use water if that works best for you. And then I have that salt that I mixed with a little bit of the lime zest. And I'm just going to put the rim of my glass all along the salt mixture just to kind of capture as much as I can. You can see I have a really nice green rim here. And the other thing I'll add is just some ice, and you can pour your cocktail directly over the ice. If you wanted to chill your mix, you can definitely do that. You can pop it in the fridge, leave it in for at least like a good 30 minutes and let it chill really well, and then have it. So let me get a few pieces of ice here. Get a couple. I just have some ice that I'll add in here. Okay. And let me get rid of all this citrus here and clean up my station. And so all I need to do at this point is just simply pour some of this mixture into my glass, and I will have a cocktail that is ready to go. And so you can see here, my Margarita is ready. So you can pour it in any size glass. You might have a Margarita specific glass, and that's totally fine. But cheers, everyone. I see Lilia drinking here. Salud. Salud a todas. That is so yummy and so simple. All right, so let's move on to our cocktail. After one more sip, I'm gonna move this aside, get my whisk out of the way. And I'm just going to clean up my station slightly. And get my towel here. I'm also gonna sharpen this knife because it is very dull. Okay, so for folks who have not worked with heart of palm yet, like I was mentioning, it's just such a versatile ingredient. You can really, I mean, use it for a variety of different things. I've seen heart of palm used for everything from crab cakes to ceviche to, you know, in sandwiches and salads. It's such a great ingredient. And when you open it up, it's typically going to be canned or jarred. You're going to see these cylinder shapes. And if you look at the cylinders, it's like a ring within a ring within a ring. So as you're cutting, you'll start to see the rings kind of come away from each other, which is totally fine. And it's up to you how you would like to cut the heart of palm. You can slice it, dice it, mince it. You can try to make, you know, different shapes out of it. I just prefer the rings. So I'll slice through this and create rings, and the rings will separate from each other. And I like that texture because I feel like it's kind of like a like calamari slash, you know, scallop style of, it kind of still blends into that texture and theme of seafood. And the other thing I will say is, depending on the brand that you get, some of the heart of palm will be really soft and almost mushy. And some of it will be on the opposite side of the spectrum, which is like really tough and kind of crunchy. I like something that's kind of in the middle, that has a little bit of firmness, right? Like if I press on it, it's going to be a little firm to the touch. And you're going to, but it's still going to have a little bit of softness to it. And this is a canned heart of palm. So I went ahead and just opened up the can and I drained out the liquid. I didn't rinse it. You could rinse it if you want to, but I find that it's not a big deal if you don't rinse it. And in fact, some of that flavor that the brine that it's sitting in is kind of, to me, what kind of gives it a little bit of that kind of like seafoody flavor to it. So I'm not going to rinse the heart of palm that I opened up here. I'm using about 14 ounces. You can get the, like I said, canned, jarred. Sometimes you can find it already sliced. I have just personally found that when it's already sliced, it's more of the more firm heart of palm that's a bit more crunchy, and it doesn't really work super well in the way that I like for this dish. So I prefer to get whole heart of palm and then slice it myself. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It's literally the heart of a palm that comes typically from South America, where it's a small palm tree and they strip the the exterior of the tree, and this is kind of the center or the core or the heart of the palm, and is used for a variety of different recipes. And I've had folks who have reached out because they couldn't find heart of palm and they used instead artichoke hearts, and it works. I will say that I think that it's personally more delicious if you use heart of palm, but if you only have artichoke hearts, it still works and it's still good. So it's kind of up to you and what you have available. I'm just going to sharpen my knife and then I'm going to start cutting up this heart of palm and adding the other ingredients to it. Any questions so far as we get started into this recipe? All right.
Lilia just said, I thought they were the same thing.
Artichoke hearts and heart of palm? Did you? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, they are different, but not, yeah, they're like two different ingredients. But if you got artichoke hearts, it'll still work. Still, still make the recipe, but it's going to be just a little different.
I got the right thing, but I thought in my head they were the same thing.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, you'll find if you haven't worked with heart of palm yet, and try both out and see how you like the differences. I find that heart of palm has like a very specific flavor, which is what I'm looking for. My knife was so sharp that it like just took a little bit of skin off, and I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I didn't cut myself. Just trying to check it. Okay, so I have my heart of palm here. I like to bring at least like 3 onto the cutting board at a time. And then just, you want to bear claw your hand so that you're cutting against your knuckles and not against your fingertips, so you don't lose a nail or fingertip. And you just want to cut these rings. And they could be about a 1/4 inch in thickness. And you'll start to see, look at this one, the ring is coming out, right? So you want to just try to hold it in place as much as you can. And things are going to roll off your cutting board. It might feel like they have a life of their own. They're going all over the place, which is totally fine. If cutting 3 at a time is too much, you can definitely cut 1 at a time. It'll just obviously be a bit slower to get through all of it. So I'm just going to cut all of these into rings. If you're new to heart of palm, grab a piece, give it a little taste, and then that way you can kind of see what the raw ingredient tastes like before you start to add everything else. So standalone, you'll find that you should have a little bit of this like tender consistency. The flavor, again, reminds me of this like, kind of like imitation crab, especially when you add all the other flavors. When you start to add the tomato, the cilantro, the tomato juice, all of it, you really start to get this very kind of seafood consistency and flavor. All right. So let me cut the last few pieces here. And again, I just opened this directly out of the can, and then I just brought it into a bowl. I strained it, brought it into a bowl, and I didn't rinse it. I'm gonna just throw out this liquid that's in here so I can start adding my heart of palm to this bowl. All right, so last little bit of heart of palm to dice up here. If you were making crab cakes with this, if you like that type of recipe, like minced heart of palm in a food processor works perfectly fine. You don't have to, you know, be as delicate with the slicing of it, because obviously it's going to be in a cake form and you're not going to really see the shape too much. But in this recipe, you do see the shape. It's the main thing you see aside from the veggies. So you want to make sure that it has a certain look that kind of makes sense more or less with the recipe that you're going for. You want to bring back that nostalgia, right? Okay, so this recipe in my cookbook, La Vida Verde, I do use oyster mushrooms to make this recipe of the cocktail. And it's the same process. The only difference is I just make sure to really like have time to marinate the mushrooms for a certain portion of time so that they get kind of like completely soaked in the tomato mixture, the tomato juice mixture with lemon juice, salt, and pepper. But it's a very, very similar recipe. And the oyster mushrooms, you'll find that because they'll just absorb that flavor, they feel very much like a minced or diced fish consistency. In fact, I've done an event where somebody came up to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, your fish ceviche was so good today. I thought you did vegan food." And I was like, "That was mushrooms." So it completely fooled them, which was so funny to me. And so great to know that people can easily be convinced. So I have all my heart of palm here that's all sliced up. I'm going to add some olive oil to it. I have here 1/3 of a cup of extra virgin olive oil. It's not going to be cooked, so extra virgin is perfect for this. It also, you know, adds a nice bit of body with the fat that you're adding from the olive oil, that nice bit of fat content. I'm just going to grab a spatula to get every little last bit of this olive oil out. So it's about 1/3 of a cup, or it is 1/3 of a cup. And I like that amount of oil in here because obviously fish and seafood, you know, they have fat content in that particular, you know, ceviche, in that fish itself or the shrimp itself. So you want to be able to provide a little bit of that kind of like fatty texture mouthfeel. And then I have 1/2 cup here of just lemon juice. And I freshly squeezed this, but again, if you have the bottle, the pre-squeezed, I still recommend to get the kind that's refrigerated. So it's actually like, you know, squeezed lemon juice and not this like sort of artificial lemon juice. And then I'm going to add my tomato juice here. I have about 4 cups of just tomato juice. This is just the store-bought tomato juice. You could blend tomatoes if you wanted to. And so I'm just gonna pour that in here. It's gonna get this like nice soupy consistency. And then you want to salt and pepper this very liberally because you're going to add all these other ingredients to it, all the veggies that are going to not be salty at all. They're gonna kind of dilute the saltiness. So you want to get this to a point where it feels pretty salty, knowing that you're going to add other things to it that are going to bring that saltiness down. So I'm going to add some salt like you saw here. I added a few pinches of just flaky kosher salt. And then I also have some fresh black ground pepper that I'm going to just crush over the top. So I have salt, pepper, lemon juice, olive oil, heart of palm in here. Give it a mix. You can pop this in the fridge as we get our other ingredients ready, or you can leave it out. I'm just gonna leave it out because my fridge is pretty full right now, so I don't have too much space to move around in there. But I'll go ahead and just set it aside as I get all my other ingredients prepped. So of course I need the other staples, which are tomates, avocado, cucumbers, jalapeño, and cilantro. So I have those other ingredients here. And I'll start off with my jalapeño, just because it's the thing that's going to be the least messy on my cutting board. And I just want to thinly slice. You can also mince it or dice it if you wanted to. If you have a mandolin, you could use a mandolin, or you can just use your blade, but you just want to get really, really thin slices. And at some point, once you start to get to sort of the core of your jalapeño, you want to give it a taste, because trust me, there have been times where we have not tasted the jalapeño for todo verde. And one event we did, the ceviche went out, and we did super paper thin. Like, look at how paper thin the slices. We did slices like this, paper thin. They went in the ceviche, and the jalapeño was just so spicy that it overpowered the dish, and all the food was coming back. All the ceviche was coming back, and we're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? We tasted it, and we're like, it's so spicy for us, you know? It was super picoso. This one's actually super picoso. So I'm only gonna probably add about half of it. Let me take a sip of my cocktail. So I won't add this whole jalapeno. Maybe I will. I mean, it's me who's gonna be eating this, so it's okay if it's a little spicy. And if you found that it is really spicy, then you can definitely oh my gosh, a little piece of chile got me. Hold on. Let me get some water. This is not the first time that this has happened to me in class, where a chile got me. All right. It just went down like the wrong side. Like a little tiny little pedacito de chile. Okay. Whew. All right. Let me just wipe the tears away.
Jocelyn, about how much salt should we be adding?
It's really salt to taste. So it kind of depends on how much like how salty your salt is what I'm trying to say. So if you are using a really fine table salt that's slightly salty, maybe you start with like 2 good pinches. I would say, like, for this amount, about like 2 teaspoons seems about right for me. You can start with 1 teaspoon, mix, taste, add another teaspoon. Once you get to 3 teaspoons, that's a tablespoon, because 3 teaspoons equals a tablespoon. So you want to get a nice amount of saltiness, like I mentioned, because once you start adding the avocado and the tomato and the jalapeno and all these other things, you're going to dilute that saltiness a little bit. And I want to kind of get some of that, you know, salty goodness marinated into the heart of palm. So you can add quite a bit now, but also know that if it doesn't end up being salty enough at the end, you can always add more. All right. So I'm just going to keep going through some of my jalapeno. Some of these slices that are coming out kind of larger, I'm just gonna cut them a little bit so that they're not huge pieces that I'm biting into, now that I know that this chile is a bit spicy. So you can definitely kind of just like mince it up slightly or cut it into slightly smaller pieces so that as somebody bites into it, it's not going to be unbearably spicy. Okay, so I have my slightly smaller pieces of jalapeno here. Again, if it was super spicy, you could also mince this up, which would just be running your knife or your blade through the chile and breaking it down until it's pretty small pieces of jalapeno. So you can keep working that until you get it to the preferred mince or size that you'd like. So since I already started doing that, I'll just run my knife a little bit more through this jalapeno so I have some nice even pieces. And when you have the mandolin, it's just so much easier to get those even thin slices of anything, of cucumber, of jalapeno, because you pretty much set it to the thickness that you want everything to come out at, and it will continue to evenly slice every time you run the piece of cucumber or jalapeno through there at that same thickness. Also, another thing I could have done, which I don't always do personally here at home, is remove the seeds of the jalapeno or the chile, but I just prefer to just have it in there, just to not toss it or throw it away, and just use a little bit less of the chile, and then when I need another chile, I use that same spicy one. But you could also just toss the seeds if it's overly spicy. Okay, so next up I have my Roma tomatoes. I have 2 medium Roma tomatoes, and all I'm doing is I'm just, I created some 1/4-inch slices, and then I laid down a couple slices, and I went through and I did a 1/4-inch batons or bâtonnet, and then I'm gonna turn the pieces so that now when I slice, it's gonna be a 1/4-inch dice or so. So I'm just dicing up this tomate and adding that to the bowl, or you can add it to another bowl if your cocktail is currently marinating and hanging out in the fridge. You can add it to another bowl and then later incorporate it together. So again, just creating slices, batons, turning it over. Don't forget to bear claw your hand, and then go ahead and create these nice even little pieces of tomato, this nice dice of tomato. And you want to make sure that you get really nice ripe tomatoes. You know, sometimes at the store you see ones that are still a little bit green, they're a little underripe. You want to get ones that look nice and red and juicy, because that flavor is going to be so much better in anything that you make, whether it's you know, this dish or another. It's just going to be so much better. And I have also made this dish with heirloom tomatoes, and that is also really nice. You could use different colors, like golden heirloom tomatoes, green heirloom tomatoes. I actually have some here. I have one that is sort of this like deep red and green, that, you know, so you can use a variety of different heirloom tomatoes, and that flavor profile of the tomatoes is definitely going to be really, really nice in your cocktail or any dish that you choose, where especially where the tomato is still raw, because that flavor of the tomato is so much better. Okay, so again, cutting the batons, turning, and then let's cut that dice up. You want to have a really sharp knife. I could probably even sharpen my knife a little bit more, but that way you have less sliding, because your knife is so sharp that it just cuts through the tomatoes and it doesn't slip around. You know, like mine is like, it's cutting through, but it has a little bit of slipping where like I have to kind of saw back and forth. A really sharp knife would just be able to go directly down into the tomato. Like this one just slipped away. So that to me tells me that my knife is not sharp enough. And one other trick that you can do when you're sharpening your knife, hopefully you have a knife sharpener at home, is the test is you can always bring your blade to a fingernail. And if you can just easily move your blade across your fingernail, it's not sharp enough. Like it should have a little bit of a grip on your fingernail, like almost like it wants to kind of like cut through your fingernail. And that's when you know that it's truly a sharp knife. And sometimes people are a little bit scared of a sharp knife because they think that they're gonna cut themselves because it's so sharp. But in fact, a sharper knife will make it less likely for you to cut yourself, because it's gonna do what you're asking it to do. What you're not gonna be applying as much pressure to like to cut something down, because the knife is so sharp that you don't need all that pressure. It's just gonna cut exactly where you want it to. I'm gonna use, I wasn't able to find a Persian cucumber, so I have a regular cucumber here. I'm gonna use about half of it to get to the desired amount. You know, Persian cucumber is much smaller. Actually, this one calls for 2 Persian cucumbers, so I could use both of them, although that's still gonna be quite a bit of cucumber. And this we just wanna dice. So you can do about a 1/4 inch dice. I like to cut the top and bottom off. If it was as long as that one, you still wanna be able to cut it in half. And you want to be able to create some 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch, depending on your dice size that you like, slices. And then you can pile those up and go ahead and cut. The batons here in the same size, about a 1/4 inch or so, and then dice it all up.
And Jocelyn, just to double check, that was only 2 tomatoes you sliced?
That was 2, yeah, 2 Roma tomatoes. And then right now I'm doing 2 Persian cucumbers, although I didn't have Persian. So I'm using here just a regular cucumber. Yeah, see, this knife still needs some work here. Let me give it another quick sharpen. And for sharpening, all I'm really doing, if you haven't sharpened a knife like this before, is I'm just using a sharpening tool, and you just want to angle your knife. Let's see how's the best, like at a slight angle here and going all the way down, right? And then you can go on the other side and get the other side of the blade. So you want to do at about a 45-degree angle so that you create that sharp edge. And you want to use pretty much the whole sharpening steel to go all the way down, obviously without getting to your hand, which should be protected a little bit with the handle. So you want to be able to get all of it to run across this sharpening steel. All right, let's see. And again, you can do that knife test across your fingernail. Mine could still use a little bit of sharpening, but it's okay. I'm gonna just clean that off. And let's see if that helped at all. And there's so many different ways to sharpen a knife too. Yeah, this could still use, I mean, I think that the skin of this cucumber period is just so thick. I'm just gonna open it up and cut from the inside, and it should be easier for me. Yeah. So sometimes that does the trick too. If you're cutting something that has sort of like a fibrous skin and it's giving you a little bit of trouble, you can go directly and like cut from the flesh side up, and that helps. So an example of that is a bell pepper. A lot of people will cut a bell pepper from the inside out when they're slicing or dicing, because when you're going from the outside, it's sometimes a little hard for your knife to penetrate the skin as easily. So here, see, I'm not having any trouble. So part of it was also the skin of the cucumber is just so tough. And if you found that your cucumber is like, sometimes the seeds are very watery, you can always cut it in half and remove those seeds just to create less of a, you know, the liquid. I find that I'm okay with it, again, in the whole, you know, effort of preventing food waste. Like, that's not trash to me, and I don't mind the cucumber seeds and liquid being a part of my cocktail. It's not a big deal to me, but to other folks, they may want it to not be as kind of centered around cucumber. I'm just gonna take that off. So like here, you could just cut the seeds out, right? If you find that it's too much liquid that is being produced by that cucumber, but that liquid is gonna taste like cucumber, so it's still gonna be really good. All right, so I am going to, actually I could probably do these all together. So just create that 1/4 inch baton, bring it all together. And create that 1/4 inch dice. And we just need a couple more things. We just need our avocado, our cilantro, and we are just about at the home stretch to finish up this cocktail dish. So folks who are cooking along, or who are slicing along, I should say, because we're not cooking, prepping along is what I would call this. How's it going so far? All right, let's see here. So I'll go ahead and add all this to my bowl. And this is gonna be a nice bit of crunch. That delicious freshness from the pepino is gonna definitely shine through in this dish. Let me cut this piece. Okay. And then for the avocado, what we need to use here is just one medium Hass avocado. I have here 2 smaller ones. There's one that's maybe a little bit more on the medium size that I'll try to use first. And what I like to do is, obviously, you know, you can cut into the avocado, cut it in half, open it up. This is a great avocado. And what I like to do is keep a couple of slices. So I might reserve just, you know, a half of this or a quarter of it, just for garnish. A slice on top of the cóctel is always really nice. Or you can do a little bit of like fanning of avocado if you wanted to. But the other thing, actually, I won't cut it in here. I'm gonna pull it out. The other thing is, you know, you wanna have a little bit of the avocado in the actual dish itself, not just as a garnish, because it's gonna also be a little bit of this like fatty texture in there that you want in your cóctel, versus like just, you know, using it all as a garnish, because you're gonna be missing a little bit of that. So you just wanna, again, slice. If you had really large pieces of avocado, you can also fillet your half of an avocado so your dice doesn't end up being so long. So this will go in to my bowl. And the rest I'll just use as a garnish. If you already added your avocado to the bowl, that's totally okay too. But maybe you can add another piece of avocado if you have it available. I'm just gonna take this out of the skin so it's ready for me. And essentially what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to create some fairly thin slices. And then what I would do is I would grab a couple of these slices. Let me turn it this way. And as I'm putting together the dish, this is actually a pretty soft avocado, so it's gonna be tough to do this, but you wanna try to fan it. It helps when the avocado is not as, maybe I'll just open up the other avocado, but essentially what you want is an avocado that's a little bit more firm so that you can slightly fan it and add it as a garnish over the top. So I'll go ahead and cut open that other avocado. Let me just slice this one up. It's a little too soft. You can see how kind of mushy it is. This is perfect for guacamole. And it's gonna be good in here too, because it'll also kind of like meld into the flavors with the ceviche a little bit. It'll kind of like the edges of the avocado will kind of start to get a little bit softer, and some of the avocado will blend into the cóctel. Okay, so what I want to do now is bring my cóctel to this area here, and I want to gently just bring it all together. You want to gently fold all the ingredients together. I don't have a huge bowl here, so it feels like it's overflowing. It kind of is overflowing, as you can see. So just gently fold it all together. The last thing we're missing here is just our cilantro, which I need to grab out of the fridge and just mince that up and add it to this dish. And you can also reserve some of your cilantro leaves to garnish the dish as well. So I'm just gonna give this a little taste and see where I'm at. And I'm checking for spiciness, saltiness, all around, just checking for flavor. You can see here if you wanted to add any more lemon juice to it, any more salt and pepper. I'm gonna add a little bit more salt to mine. And then obviously the cilantro, which is gonna be a nice burst of flavor as well too. So I'm gonna add a nice pinch of salt, give it a mix, give it another taste, and see where I'm at. All right. It's looking pretty good so far, despite it not having cilantro yet. All right, let me grab another spoon to taste here. So again, just tasting for salt, tasting for that little bit of like fattiness from the olive oil. You're tasting to see it, how your heart of palm feels in the whole dish. I like to get a little bite of everything. And then let's add the cilantro to it and give it one last taste. And if all is good to go, then we're ready to eat. Yeah, that was a good amount of salt. That was good. And that chile, whew, it definitely does have a kick, which is good. All right. So you need about half a bunch of cilantro. I'm glad I minced up that jalapeno because it definitely does have a kick. So I like to store my cilantro, as you can see, in a container with some water. And that just helps to keep it nice and fresh in the fridge and alive, so that you don't have any wilting that happens prematurely, and it lasts quite a bit in your fridge. All right, and then I'm just going to grab my cilantro, which is also already washed. So I bring it home, I wash it, and then add it to this container with water. So I have about half a bunch here. I'll just, and I like to use stems and all. So I'm just gonna check to see if I would need to remove any little bits. So sometimes you have some bits that don't look as fresh or have already wilted. So I'm just looking out for that, removing any of that. And then I also like to remove any of like the, you can see here the gradient of color of like a dark, nice green, and it starts to get lighter and lighter. I like to trim off a little bit of the cilantro. And of course you can use this for compost or to make a broth, or you can blend it and make some cilantro rice. You can use it for a variety of different things. And then the other thing that I will do is I will go ahead and cut my bunch of cilantro in half, and then I'll bunch it all together, again, using my bear claw hand. And then I will start to mince my cilantro. Just cutting into small little bits here so that it kind of really permeates throughout the entire dish. And it's gonna be in every single bite, which is gonna be so good. I love cilantro so much because it's such a, I mean, it's my favorite of all the herbs, obviously. It just has such a strong earthy flavor, but that also feels like it could be balanced out pretty easily. Like I like epazote as well, but epazote and fresh oregano obviously are like much stronger and harder to balance out with dishes if they're used a little too much. But I almost feel like I could almost eat a whole salad of cilantro and a little bit of something else and I'll still be perfectly happy. So mince it until you get your desired texture of mince. Some people like slightly larger pieces of cilantro. You can get really small little minces of cilantro. You again want to have a sharp knife for this because if you don't, you're going to just be bruising your cilantro rather than like slicing all the way down to the cutting board. Okay. And I'll bring this over in just a second. The last thing I'm going to do is just cut open that last avocado so that hopefully I can get a little bit of garnishing pieces. And my knife again is not wanting to slice through. This is so strange. My poor knife is having a bad day today. All right. Okay. So I'm just gonna get a little bit of that avocado. I'm gonna grab another spoon, scoop it out, create some slices, get a nice garnish going, and start plating my cóctel. This one's a little soft too, but just a little firmer than the last one. Make some slightly larger pieces. All right, so that's ready to go for me. Just scoot this over, bring over my cóctel and get all that cilantro worked in there. Being careful to fold it all in together and get it all incorporated. Whew. It's almost overflowing here. I'm gonna have cóctel for days. All right. And this is really cool to serve. I mean, you could, right now I'm gonna serve it in a bowl, but you can serve it definitely in a glass, which is the way that you typically see cócteles throughout Mexico served, like in a sundae, ice cream sundae glass, or in a bowl. But you can get creative with however you want to serve it. There's this place in Mexico, Mercado 28 in Cancun, that I have gone to many times back in the day, and their cóctel was just like always the spot to go to, and they would serve it in the ice cream sundae glass and like drizzle a little bit of oil over the top, so it was like a little bit of like sweet, savory, spicy. The oil had a little bit of sweetness to it. And so it was just such a well-balanced cóctel that I still think about, even though I wouldn't eat it nowadays, but they just did such a good job of making that balance work. So I have a little bowl here, some tortilla chips. And let's get this plated up. So let me get this a little more cleaned up here.
Jocelyn, is this something that you served at Smorgasbord?
No, actually maybe a couple times it was served at Smorgasbord, but we typically served the ceviche there, which is very similar. It's very similar, obviously minus the tomato juice in that particular recipe, you know, but you can definitely make a very similar recipe minus the tomato juice and get the ceviche. So I am just adding a equal ratio of like, I want to be able to like see some texture in my bowl of the cóctel, but also be able to see that it's a cóctel and that it has some juice in there. And then I'm going to garnish with a little bit of my with my avocado. So I'll add a couple slices of my avocado here over the top, just to garnish there. It's still a little soft, but better definitely than the other one.
And will you be garnishing with any black sesame?
Yeah, that's coming right up. So I have my black sesame seeds right here. And I'm just going to grab a few, just a pinch, and garnish that over the top. And then the last thing I'll add is just a couple of cilantro leaves. So you can just garnish with simply like one sprig of cilantro leaf if you wanted to, or a couple, but that's always just like a nice little delicate touch to finish off the dish. And of course I have some tortilla chips here. A hot sauce that I like to use for this cóctel, just if you are into hot sauces, is I just find that this black habanero yucateco salsa is just so good with this particular dish. It's you can see here that the color is black. And so, you know, you could add something like that. You could add whatever hot sauce you have. I obviously grew up like most of us eating tapatio. So that's one that's always going to be like near and dear. I have tapatio in the fridge forever. But this one just kind of gives this nice bit of like smokiness to the dish. So it adds like another nice depth of flavor that I really like. And then we can give it a taste. So any questions? We have our cocktail, our cocktail, our chips. Salud.